Welcome to your practice question review for the Ohio Real Estate Salesperson exam. Every question mirrors the real exam. We cover why the right answer works, why others fail, and the concept that ties it together. Today's Section 1 covers property, valuation and title, real property, personal property and fixtures, trade fixtures and emblements, estates and life estates, Ohio dower rights, elements of value and market value. Our website provides free exam guides and practice questions designed to help you ace the Ohio Real Estate exam. Everything you need is organized and easy to follow, so you can prepare with confidence. You'll find the link right in the description below. Check it out and start studying smarter, not harder. All right, let's dive in. Question 1. Which of the following terms describes movable property, such as furniture or a vehicle, that is transferred by a bill of sale rather than a deed? Your options are A. Personal property, B. Real property, C. A fixture, D. An appurtenance. Which one is it? Pause the video if you need more time. The correct answer is A. Personal property. A is correct because personal property, also called chattel, is movable and does not meet the definition of real property. Ownership passes by a bill of sale while real estate is conveyed by deed. B is wrong because real property is the land, its permanent improvements, and the bundle of rights that come with them. Those items are fixed in place, not movable, and they transfer by deed. C is wrong because a fixture began as personal property but became part of the realty through attachment. Once it is a fixture, it conveys with the building, the opposite of freely movable goods. D is wrong because an appurtenance is a right that runs with the land, like an easement. It is a benefit tied to the parcel, not a tangible, movable object you would carry away. Every licensee needs to see one dividing line clearly. The line between personal property and real property, because it decides how ownership actually moves from one person to another. Personal property, once called chattel, is anything movable, like furniture or a television on a stand. Real property is the land itself and anything permanently attached to it. The test is simple. If you can carry it off without tearing the building apart, it's personal property. Land is permanent and unique, so the law wraps it in formality, written deeds, signatures, public recording. Movable goods are easily replaced, so they pass hands with a far simpler bill of sale. The tricky part is the middle ground. A pile of lumber is personal property, but nail it into a deck fastened to the house, and it becomes part of the realty. The same is true of a chandelier wired into a ceiling. Hold personal property against the ideas that crowd around it. A fixture was once personal property but became real through attachment. An appurtenance is a right, like an easement that travels with the land. Personal property alone stays movable and passes by a bill of sale. Question 2. When deciding whether an installed item is a fixture or remains personal property, which of the following factors is treated as the most important consideration? Your options are A. Method of attachment, B. Cost of the item, C. Intention of the annexer, D. Color of the item. Take a second. Which answer would you pick? The correct answer is C. Intention of the annexer. C is correct because under the Maria test, the intention of the person who attached the item controls when the factors conflict. Courts ask whether the annexer meant a permanent improvement or only temporary use. A is wrong because method of attachment is only one Maria factor and yields to intention when they disagree. A securely bolted item can still be personal property if intent points that way. B is wrong because the price paid for an article is not one of the Maria factors at all. An inexpensive built-in can be a fixture, while a costly freestanding appliance stays personal property. D is wrong because appearance has no bearing on fixture status. The law looks at attachment, adaptation, the parties' relationship, intention, and any agreement, never the item's color or style. When something gets attached to real estate, courts must decide if it stayed personal property or became part of the land. They use a checklist called Maria, but the letters are not equal partners. Maria stands for method of attachment, adaptation, relationship of the parties, intention of the annexer, and agreement. All 5 sit on the table, but intention of the annexer outranks the rest, because it explains what the other clues are really evidence of. Picture a built-in bookcase, scribed and screwed to the studs to fit one alcove exactly. That physical record of intent beats any later claim that it was just furniture. Now flip it. A tenant bolts a display rack to a wall, but the lease says the rack stays theirs. The agreement reveals an intent to keep it personal, so it leaves with the tenant. Attachment alone would produce absurd results. A heavy safe can sit unattached and still be promised as a fixture, while a small mirror screwed up for permanence could unfairly become one. The physical facts only matter as clues pointing toward what the annexer actually intended. The exam's favorite trap is price or appearance, which feel relevant but are not Maria factors at all. Whenever a STEM asks what controls, reach for intention of the annexer, read through attachment and adaptation, and the fixture question stops being a coin flip. Question 3. A commercial tenant installs shelving and counters to run a retail business in leased space. Which of the following best describes these articles? Your options are A. Appurtenances, B. Trade fixtures, C. Implement, D. Encroachments. Before I reveal it, which one do you think is right? The correct answer is B. Trade fixtures. B is correct because trade fixtures are articles a business tenant annexes to lease space to conduct a trade. They remain the tenant's personal property and may be removed on or before the last day of the lease. A is wrong because an appurtenance is a right that passes with the land, not a business article a tenant installs. The shelving belongs to the tenant and leaves with the tenant, not the parcel. C is wrong because implements are annually cultivated crops a farming tenant may harvest. Store shelving has nothing to do with agriculture, so the implements doctrine simply does not reach it. D is wrong because an encroachment is a structure that crosses a boundary onto a neighbor's land. The tenant's counters sit inside the leased premises and intrude on no one else's property. Picture a tenant bolting shelves, counters, and equipment into an empty storefront to run a business. The law has a special rule for exactly the situation called the trade fixture. Normally, anything attached to real estate becomes part of the building and belongs to the landlord. Trade fixtures are the deliberate exception. Ovens, chairs, and shelving installed for business use stay with the tenant, because commerce would grind to a halt if every lease turnover meant losing your equipment. Imagine a coffee shop that bolts in an espresso bar, refrigeration, and menu shelving. When the lease ends, the operator can unbolt and take every one of these trade fixtures, patching walls and capping pipes on the way out. Watch for distractors. An appurtenance is a right running with the land, not a physical item. Implements are annually cultivated crops a farmer may harvest. An encroachment is a structure crossing onto a neighbor's land. Only trade fixtures describe business gear a tenant installs and removes. Attachment normally turns personal property into real property owned by the landlord, but trade fixtures reverse that rule for a business tenant's equipment, so long as it's removed on or before the last day of the lease. Question 4. A tenant farmer plants and cultivates an annual corn crop. Which of the following describes the farmer's right to re-enter and harvest that crop after the tenancy ends? Your options are A. Riparian rights, B. Lateral support, C. Accretion, D. Implement. What's your answer? Commit to one before I continue. The correct answer is D, implements. D is correct because the doctrine of implements lets a farming tenant return to harvest annually cultivated crops produced by labor, even after the lease ends. Such crops are treated as personal property of the tenant. A is wrong because riparian rights concern an owner's use of water in an adjoining river or stream. They govern water access, not a tenant's right to gather a planted crop after a tenancy ends. B is wrong because lateral support is the right to have one's land supported by adjoining land. That protects the soil itself from collapse and says nothing about harvesting a cultivated crop. C is wrong because accretion is the gradual build-up of land from soil deposited by water. It changes how much land an owner has and is unrelated to a farmer reclaiming a corn crop. Implement solves a fairness problem in farming. A tenant plants a crop, but the lease ends before harvest. This doctrine lets the tenant come back to gather what they grew. The logic is simple. If a lease ended right before harvest and the crop reverted to the owner, no tenant would ever plant near the end of a term. Implements protects the tenant's reasonable expectation of reaping what they sowed, keeping farmland in productive use. The mechanism only reaches crops planted and cultivated annually, called fructus industrialis, the fruits of industry. It generally applies when the tenancy ends through no fault of the tenant for a term of uncertain length, and the right is only to re-enter and harvest, not to keep farming the ground. Picture a farmer who plants corn in spring, then learns the lease ends before the ears mature. Implements lets that farmer return to cut and remove the corn. A stand of walnut trees on the same field would not qualify, because trees are part of the realty, not the product of annual labor. Exam questions surround implements with water and boundary terms that only sound similar. Riparian rights concern water use, lateral support concerns soil held in place, and accretion concerns land built up by water, but none of them touch a tenant's claim to a planted crop, which is what makes implements the odd term out. Question 5. Which of the following best describes a group of rights including possession, control, enjoyment, exclusion, and disposition that an owner holds in real property? Your options are A. The bundle of legal rights, B. A leasehold estate, C. An encumbrance, D. A bill of sale. Pick one. Trust your gut. Here's your chance to test yourself. The correct answer is A. The bundle of legal rights. A is correct because ownership is understood as a bundle of legal rights, each a separable stick: possession, control, enjoyment, exclusion, and disposition. An owner can keep some rights while transferring others individually. B is wrong because a leasehold estate is only the tenant's temporary right to possess. It is a single interest carved out for a term, not the full collection of ownership rights an owner holds. C is wrong because an encumbrance is a claim that burdens title held by someone other than the owner. It limits ownership rather than describing the complete set of rights ownership confers. D is wrong because a bill of sale is the document that transfers personal property. It is a conveyance instrument, not the metaphor used to describe the rights bundled in real property ownership. Ownership of real estate isn't one solid thing. It's better understood as a bundle of separate rights, each one a stick that can be held, handed off, or kept back on its own. The classic list names 5 sticks: possession, control, enjoyment, exclusion, and disposition. An owner can pull out a single stick and transfer it while keeping the rest, which is why ownership is rarely all or nothing. Picture an owner who leases the first floor to a shop, grants a utility and easement along the side yard, and pledges the property for a loan. Possession goes to the tenant, a slice of exclusion goes to the utility, and a claim on disposition goes to the lender, yet the owner still holds the bundle. The exam trap is naming one stick and dressing it up as the whole. A leasehold is just the tenant's temporary possession. An easement burdens only exclusion. and a mortgage only encumbers disposition, none of them is the full bundle. When a stem describes the full array of an owner's powers, it's describing the bundle of legal rights. When it isolates one right, it has moved down to a single stick. Question 6. An owner's land borders a flowing river. Which of the following terms identifies the water rights that belong to an owner along a moving watercourse? Your options are A. Literal rights, B. Prior appropriation, C. Riparian rights, D. Percolating rights. Which would you go with? Lock it in before the reveal. The correct answer is C. Riparian rights. C is correct because riparian rights belong to owners whose land adjoins a flowing body of water, such as a river or stream. The owner may use the water without unreasonably interrupting the flow for downstream owners. A is wrong because literal rights attach to land bordering a static body of water like a lake or ocean. A moving river calls for riparian analysis, so literal is the wrong classification here. B is wrong because prior appropriation governs arid states where the state controls water by permit and beneficial use. Ohio follows riparian principles, so an appropriation framework does not apply. D is wrong because percolating water refers to underground water not flowing in a defined channel. The question describes a surface river which is governed by riparian rights, not percolation rules. Riparian rights belong to landowners whose property touches a flowing river or stream. The name comes from the Latin word for riverbank, and that's the whole idea: reasonable use of the water by whoever owns the bank. A river isn't a fixed pond one owner can hoard. It flows from parcel to parcel, so the law caps every owner's use at what's reasonable, ensuring an upstream farm can't drain or foul the stream and leave downstream neighbors dry. Picture a river running past several farms. Each owner along the bank may draw water for reasonable use, but that use is limited, so it doesn't unreasonably interfere with the neighbor's rights further downstream. The exam pairs riparian with 3 lookalikes. Literal rights attached to standing water like a lake or ocean. Prior appropriation is the Western permit system based on first-in-time use. Percolating water is groundwater with no defined channel. Matching the right to the type of water is the whole skill. Riparian rights run with the land, not the person, and last as long as that land touches the flowing water. Ask whether the water moves, sits, is rationed by permit, or hides underground, and the right names itself. Question 7. A sudden flood violently shifts a river's course and moves soil overnight. Which of the following terms describes this abrupt change, which generally does not alter legal boundaries? Your options are A. Accretion, B. Erosion, C. Reliction, D. Avulsion. Don't overthink it. Which one feels right? The correct answer is D. Avulsion. D is correct because avulsion is the sudden loss or addition of land by a violent natural force such as a flood. Because the change is abrupt rather than gradual, boundaries usually remain where they were before. A is wrong because accretion is the slow, gradual build-up of land from waterborne soil. The question stresses a sudden overnight event, which is the opposite of the gradual process accretion describes. B is wrong because erosion is the gradual wearing away of land over time by water or wind. It removes land slowly, so it cannot describe a violent flood that rearranges soil in a single night. C is wrong because reliction is land exposed when water gradually recedes. It involves a slow retreat of water uncovering soil, not the abrupt, forceful shift of a river that avulsion captures. When a river reshapes land, the law asks one question first: did the change happen suddenly or gradually? The answer decides whether property boundaries move with the water or stay frozen in place. Avulsion is the sudden violent shift of a watercourse, like a flood ripping a new channel overnight. Because the change is abrupt, the law freezes the boundary where it stood before. So no one wins or loses land through pure catastrophe. Accretion, erosion, and reliction are the gradual cousins. Soil slowly builds along a bank, land slowly wears away, or water slowly recedes to expose new ground. Because these changes are gradual and imperceptible day to day, the boundary quietly moves along with them. Picture a stream marking the line between two farms, drifting a few inches a year from accretion and erosion. When a violent flood blasts a brand new channel across the pasture overnight, that's avulsion, and the old boundary line stays exactly where it was. The cue that settles every version of this question is pace. Fast and violent means avulsion, and the old line survives. Slow and gradual means accretion, erosion, or reliction, and the boundary travels with the change. Question 8. An easement benefits one parcel and burdens an adjoining parcel owned by another. Which of the following correctly labels the parcel that enjoys the benefit? Your options are A. The servient tenement, B. The dominant tenement, C. The leasehold tenement, D. The remainder tenement. Gotta guess, lock it in. The correct answer is B. The dominant tenement. B is correct because in an easement appurtenant, the dominant tenement is the parcel that benefits from the use. The servient tenement is the parcel that is burdened, and the benefit runs with the dominant land. A is wrong because the servient tenement is the burdened parcel that is crossed or used. It carries the obligation, so it cannot be the estate that enjoys the benefits the easement provides. C is wrong because there is no leasehold tenement in easement analysis. A leasehold is a tenant's possessory interest, a separate concept from the dominant and servient estates of an easement. D is wrong because a remainder is a future interest following a life estate, not a parcel in an easement. The easement framework uses only dominant and servient tenements, not a remainder. Every easement links two parcels pulling in opposite directions. One gains a benefit, the other carries a burden. Getting these two labels straight is the whole game. The dominant tenement is the parcel that enjoys the benefit, like the right to cross a neighbor's land. The servient tenement is the parcel that bears the burden, the land the easement crosses or restricts. This anchoring to real estate rather than a person is what makes an easement a right in someone else's land. Picture a backlot with no street frontage, reaching the road only through a driveway crossing the front lot. The backlot is dominant because it holds the right to cross. The front lot is servient because its owner must permit that crossing. This easement is appurtenant, meaning it attaches to the land itself, not a specific person. Sell the dominant parcel and the new owner inherits the right of way. Sell the servient parcel and the new owner takes it still burdened. Servient is the trap term, so fix this pairing in your mind. Dominant equals benefit, servient equals burden. Keep that straight and the exam's favorite flip never lands. Question 9. Which of the following describes mere personal permission to use another's land? Revocable at the owner's will and not an interest in land? Your options are a license, B, an easement appurtenant, C, a prescriptive easement, D, a deed restriction. Which one is it? Pause the video if you need more time. The correct answer is A, license. A is correct because a license is revocable permission to enter or use land for a specific purpose. It is personal, non-assignable, and not an interest in land, so the owner may withdraw it at any time. B is wrong because an easement appurtenant is an irrevocable interest in land that runs with the dominant parcel. Unlike a license, it survives changes in ownership and cannot be cancelled at will. C is wrong because a prescriptive easement is acquired by long open, adverse use and becomes a permanent right. That permanence is the opposite of permission the owner can revoke whenever desired. D is wrong because a deed restriction is a private limit on how land may be used written into the deed. It binds owners rather than granting one party revocable permission to enter the property. Not every permission to use someone else's land is a property interest. The weakest form of that permission is called a license, and knowing how it differs from an easement is the key to avoiding a classic exam trap. A license is bare personal permission for a specific purpose, revocable at the owner's will, and it creates no lasting interest in the land. Think of a parking ticket, permission to fish a pond for an afternoon, or an invitation to cross a field. Two features define a license. First, it's revocable. The owner can take it back at any time, and any remedy sounds in contract, not property. Second, it's personal. It belongs only to the recipient and cannot be sold, inherited, or passed to a new owner. Picture a landowner telling a neighbor they can launch a canoe from the riverbank whenever they like. That's a license, revocable, personal, and gone if the neighbor sells the house. Had it been a signed, recorded easement instead, it would bind all future owners of that land. On the exam, watch for revocable, personal, and no interest in land as the giveaway phrases for a license. When the facts show a courtesy, the owner can cancel that dies with a change of hands. It's a license, not the sturdier easement beside it. Question 10. Which of the following liens attaches only to one identified parcel of real estate rather than to all of the debtor's property? Your options are A. A federal income tax lien, B. A general judgment lien, C. An estate tax lien, D. A mortgage lien. Take a second. Which answer would you pick? The correct answer is D. A mortgage lien. D is correct because a mortgage lien is a specific lien because it attaches to the single parcel pledged as security for the loan. General liens, by contrast, reach all of the debtor's property within the jurisdiction. A is wrong because a federal income tax lien sweeps across every asset the taxpayer owns, real and personal alike. That broad blanket reach makes it a general lien, never one tied to a single parcel. B is wrong because a recorded money judgment fastens to the whole of a debtor's land in the county and is enforced by a writ of execution. Such jurisdiction-wide coverage is the mark of a general lien. C is wrong because an estate tax lien burdens the entire estate, not one chosen tract. It lacks the parcel-specific focus that defines the mortgage answer, since it spreads over all the decedent's holdings instead. Liens come in two families based on how much property they reach, and the mortgage lien belongs to the narrower one. Let's see what separates a specific lien from a general lien. A specific lien attaches to a single identified parcel of real estate, while a general lien reaches all of a debtor's property, real and personal. A mortgage is the classic specific lien. It fastens to the one property pledged as security and nothing else the borrower owns. Specific liens exist because the debt and the collateral are matched. A mortgage, a mechanic's lien for work on a building, and property taxes on a parcel are all tied to the very real estate that created the debt. Picture a borrower who mortgages a rental house but also owns a separate residence, a car, and a savings account. The mortgage lien reaches only that rental house. If the borrower defaults, foreclosure sells that one parcel, leaving everything else untouched. General liens like judgments and income or estate tax liens spread across everything a debtor owns, but the mortgage lien voluntarily fastens to just one named property. Spotting that single parcel targeting is the key to identifying a specific lien on the exam. Question 11. A neighbor's garage extends a few inches across the boundary line onto an adjoining lot. Which of the following terms describes this unauthorized physical intrusion? Your options are Oh, a license. B. Alice pendens. C. An encroachment. D. An appurtenance. Before I reveal it, which one do you think is right? The correct answer is C. An encroachment. C is correct because an encroachment is an improvement that illegally extends beyond its owner's boundary onto a neighbor's land. It is typically revealed by a survey rather than by examining the public records. A is wrong because a license is permission to use land freely given by the owner. An encroachment is an unauthorized intrusion, so it lacks the consent that defines a license entirely. B is wrong because alias pendens is a recorded notice of pending litigation affecting title. It is a paper filing in the records, not a physical structure crossing a boundary line onto another lot. D is wrong because an appurtenance is a right that passes with the land as a benefit. A garage crossing a boundary is a trespassing structure, not a beneficial right tied to the parcel. A garage that creeps a few inches onto the neighbor's lot is the classic picture of an encroachment, an unauthorized physical intrusion of a structure across a boundary onto someone else's land. Picture two lots side by side. The garage sits mostly on its own land, but one corner physically crosses the line onto the neighbor's ground, with no permission granted at all. An encroachment quietly hurts both sides. It clouds the burdened neighbor's title, and it shows up on the encroaching owner's buyer's survey, stalling sales until resolved and if ignored long enough. It can even ripen into a prescriptive easement or adverse possession. The exam tests you by crowding encroachment next to lookalikes. An easement is a granted right to use land. A license is revocable consent. And an encumbrance is the broad umbrella of any claim on title. An encroachment is none of these. It's trespass with no permission at all. Remember, when a fact pattern shows a structure physically crossing a line without consent, revealed by a surveyor rather than the title records, that's an encroachment. Question 12. Two owners hold undivided fractional shares with no right of survivorship, so each share passes to that owner's heirs at death. Which of the following describes this ownership? Your options are A. Tenancy in common, B. Survivorship tenancy, C. Severalty, D. Tenancy by the entirety. What's your answer? Commit to one before I continue. The correct answer is A. Tenancy in common. A is correct because tenancy in common gives each co-owner an undivided fractional interest with unity of possession only. There is no survivorship, so a deceased tenant's share passes by will or to heirs, not to the others. B is wrong because survivorship tenancy passes a decedent's interest automatically to the surviving owners. That feature directly contradicts the question's statement that each share goes to the owner's heirs. C is wrong because severalty means ownership by one person or entity alone. The question describes two co-owners sharing the property, which is co-ownership rather than sole ownership in severalty. D is wrong because tenancy by the entirety is a married couple form, carrying survivorship and can no longer be created in Ohio. The described interest lacks survivorship and is not limited to spouses. Tenancy in common is the default way two or more people can own the same property together, and it is built for flexibility rather than automatic transfer between owners. Each co-owner holds an undivided fractional interest in the whole property. There is no right of survivorship. The shares can be unequal, and each owner can sell, mortgage, or will their share independently. Undivided means each owner has a fractional interest spread across the entire parcel, not a marked off section of it. A 1/4 owner does not own the back quarter of the lot. They own 1/4 of every square foot alongside the others. The exam contrast rides entirely on survivorship. Joint tenants automatically absorb a deceased owner's share outside probate, but tenants in common see that share pass to heirs or devisees through the estate. If the facts say a share passes to a co-owner's heirs, you're looking at tenancy in common. If it passes automatically to the surviving co-owners, the form has changed to joint tenancy. Question 13. In Ohio, which of the following did the statutory survivorship tenancy replace as the vehicle for passing a co-owner's interest automatically to the survivors at death? Your options are A. Tenancy in common, B. Common law joint tenancy, C. A life estate, D. Ownership and severalty. Pick one. Trust your gut. Here's your chance to test yourself. The correct answer is B. Common law joint tenancy. B is correct because Ohio abolished the common law joint tenancy with right of survivorship and replaced it with a statutory survivorship tenancy. Created by specific language, it passes a decedent's interest to the surviving tenants. A is wrong because tenancy in common is the default form that has no survivorship. Ohio did not replace it with survivorship tenancy. The two coexist and serve different ownership purposes. C is wrong because a life estate is a freehold limited to a lifetime, followed by a remainder or reversion. It is a separate concept and was not the survivorship device Ohio statutorily replaced. D is wrong because severalty is sole ownership by one party and involves no survivors to receive an interest. It was never a survivorship form, so survivorship tenancy did not replace it. Ohio replaced the old common law joint tenancy with a new statutory tool for passing property automatically to survivors. Understanding why that switch happened is the key to this concept. At common law, survivorship depended on a joint tenancy built from 4 unities: time, title, interest, and possession. If any single unity broke, say, one owner secretly conveyed away a sliver of interest, the whole survivorship right could be destroyed without anyone realizing it. Picture 2 siblings named as survivorship tenants in their Ohio deed. When one dies, the surviving sibling automatically becomes sole owner outside of probate, because the right came straight from the deed's language, not from fragile common law unities. Only the common law joint tenancy is correct. It's the exact device the statute replaced. Tenancy in common has no survivorship at all. Tenancy by the entirety is a spousal form Ohio no longer creates, and dower is an unrelated marital life estate interest. The Ohio-specific lesson, survivorship, now comes from the deed's express words, created precisely because the common law joint tenancy's unities were too easy to break. Question 14. In which of the following ownership forms does a resident own shares of a corporation and hold a proprietary lease rather than fee title to real estate? Your options are A. Condominium, B. Timeshare estate, C. Severalty, D. Cooperative. Which would you go with? Lock it in before the reveal. The correct answer is D. Cooperative. D is correct because in a cooperative, a corporation owns the building and fee, and the resident buys shares and receives a proprietary lease to a unit. The resident's interest is personal property, not real estate. A is wrong because a condominium owner holds fee title to the unit's airspace plus a share of the common elements. That is real property with an individual deed, unlike the shares and lease cooperative model. B is wrong because a timeshare estate is a fee interest conveyed by deed for recurring intervals of use. It is real property tied to a resort unit, not corporate stock paired with a lease. C is wrong because severalty is ownership of real estate by one person alone. It involves direct title to property, not the purchase of corporate shares coupled with a proprietary lease to occupy. A cooperative flips the usual idea of home ownership. Instead of owning real estate, A resident owns shares of stock in a corporation that owns the entire building and land. The shareholder gets stock plus a proprietary lease, which grants the right to occupy one apartment. Because the corporation alone holds fee title, the shares and lease are classified as personal property, not real property. Picture the corporation at the center, holding the deed and one blanket mortgage over the whole building. Every resident connects to it as both a shareholder and a leaseholding tenant, never as an owner of real estate directly. The shared blanket mortgage also explains why co-op boards screen buyers so closely. Every new shareholder becomes a financial partner in the whole enterprise. Compare that to a condominium, where the owner holds fee title to the unit and finances it with an individual mortgage. So watch for the ownership object in the question. Stock certificate plus proprietary lease signals a cooperative, while a recorded deed to a numbered unit signals a condominium. Question 15. Which of the following interests gives a person the right to use a property for the duration of a lifetime, after which it passes to another? Your options are A. A fee simple absolute, B. An estate for years, C. A life estate, D. A periodic tenancy. Don't overthink it. Which one feels right? The correct answer is C. A life estate. C is correct because a life estate is a freehold estate limited in duration to a measuring lifetime. The life tenant holds full use rights during that life, and the property then passes to a remainder man or reverts. A is wrong because a fee simple absolute is the greatest perpetual estate with no built-in time limit. It does not end at a person's death, so it cannot be the lifetime limited interest described. B is wrong because an estate for years is a leasehold that runs for a fixed definite term. It is measured by a set period, not by the length of a person's life, and conveys only possession. D is wrong because a periodic tenancy is a leasehold that renews period to period until terminated by notice. It is a rental arrangement, not a freehold interest measured by someone's lifetime. A life estate is ownership measured not by forever, but by a lifetime. It's a real present ownership interest, not a lease, but it comes with a built-in expiration tied to a human life. The life tenant gets full use in the meantime, the right to live there, to rent it out and keep the income, and to enjoy every benefit of ownership. But this comes paired with a duty not to waste the property, and an obligation to pay taxes and upkeep, because a future holder is entitled to receive it intact. Picture an elderly owner who deeds her house to her son but keeps a life estate for herself. She lives there, pays taxes, and collects any rent, while her son holds a waiting interest that automatically ripens into full ownership the moment her life estate ends. Usually the measuring life is the life tenant's own, but sometimes it's measured by someone else's life entirely. An arrangement called life estate per autre vie. There, the interest lasts only as long as that third person lives, and can even pass temporarily to the holder's heirs if the holder dies first. See the life estate as ownership with a lifetime fuse, full use now, a duty against waste, and an automatic handoff the moment the measuring life ends. Whenever a stem describes useful life followed by a transfer, a life estate and its waiting future interest are in play. Question 16. An owner conveys property to a life tenant and names a third party to receive the fee when the life estate ends. Which of the following describes that third party's interest? Your options are A remainder, B, a reversion, C, a possibility of reverter, D, a leasehold. Got a guess? Lock it in. The correct answer is A, a remainder. A is correct because when the creator of a life estate names a third party to take the fee after the measuring life ends, that party holds a remainder. The remainder man receives full ownership once the life estate terminates. B is wrong because A reversion returns the property to the original grantor, not to a named third party. Because the grantor here designated someone else, the future interest is a remainder rather than a reversion. C is wrong because A possibility of reverter follows a fee, simple determinable, not a life estate. It lets a grantor retake land if a stated condition fails, which is a different arrangement entirely. D is wrong because a leasehold is a tenant's possessory interest for a term. The third party receives a future ownership interest in the fee, not a temporary right to rent and occupy the property. When a life estate is carved out, someone must be waiting to take the property once that life ends. If that someone is a named third party, their future interest is called a remainder. Every remainder involves three players: the grantor, who sets up the arrangement, the life tenant, who possesses and uses the property during the measuring life, and the remainder man, who stands next in line. Both the life estate and the remainder exist from the moment of conveyance, even though only one is possessory at a time. What makes a remainder is that the future interest goes forward to a third party rather than back to the grantor. If it returns to the grantor, that's a reversion, not a remainder. The timing is identical, only the direction of the property differs. Picture a farm conveyed to a life tenant for life, with the deed naming a niece to take the farm when the life tenant dies. The niece holds a real, transferable remainder from the day the deed is signed, and when the life tenant dies, her interest becomes possessory automatically, with no new conveyance needed. Reduced to its core, a remainder is the future fee handed to an outsider, springing to life the instant the life estate ends. Trace where the property travels when the life estate terminates, and remainders and reversions separate cleanly. Question 17. In Ohio, even when only one spouse holds title, the other spouse must sign the deed at closing to release which of the following interests? Your options are A. A mechanics lien, B. A homestead tax credit, C. An inchoate dower interest, D. A right of first refusal. Which one is it? Pause the video if you need more time. The correct answer is C, an inchoate dower interest. C is correct because Ohio still recognizes dower, giving a spouse an inchoate 1/3 life estate interest in the other spouse's property. The non-titled spouse must sign the deed to release that interest and deliver marketable title. A is wrong because a mechanics lien secures payment to contractors who improved the property. It is a money claim filed by a builder, not a marital interest a spouse releases by signing the deed. B is wrong because the homestead tax credit is a property tax reduction for qualifying owners. It is a tax benefit, not a title interest that a non-owning spouse must release at the closing table. D is wrong because a right of first refusal lets a holder match an offer before a sale. It is a contractual purchase right unrelated to the spousal dower interest Ohio requires the spouse to release. Ohio keeps alive an old marital protection called dower, and it explains why a spouse who isn't on the title still has to sign the deed at closing. Inchoate means unripe or incomplete. While both spouses live, the non-titled spouse holds a contingent, not yet possessory claim that isn't ownership, isn't a present estate, but is still a real legal interest tied to that 1/3 life estate. Dower exists, so a spouse isn't left with nothing when the other spouse, holding title alone, disposes of the family's real estate. It's a floor of security that sits dormant until events cause it to ripen. Because the non-titled spouse's inchoate dower can ripen into a 1/3 life estate, a buyer can't take clear title unless that interest is released. The non-titled spouse signs the deed not to claim ownership, but to relinquish that dower interest. Watch for the trap. A homestead exemption protects against creditors, not this signature. Survivorship applies to co-owners on title. Community property doesn't exist in Ohio. When a non-titled Ohio spouse signs to clear title, it's inchoate dower being released. Question 18. Which of the following sets lists the 4 characteristics a property must possess to have value in the market? Your options are A. Demand, utility, scarcity, transferability. B. Location, size, age, condition. C. Land, labor, capital, profit. D. Possession, control, enjoyment, disposition. Take a second. Which answer would you pick? The correct answer is A. Demand, utility, scarcity, transferability. A is correct because for a property to have market value, it must have demand backed by purchasing power, utility, scarcity, and transferability. These 4 traits are remembered by the acronym DOST. B is wrong because location, size, age, and condition are physical features compared during appraisal adjustments. They describe a property's characteristics, not the 4 economic ingredients required for value to exist. C is wrong because land, labor, capital, and profit are the classic factors of production in economics. They explain how goods are produced, not the qualities a property needs to hold market value. D is wrong because possession, control, enjoyment, and disposition are sticks in the bundle of ownership rights. They define what an owner may do, not the elements that give a property value. For anything to have market value, 4 qualities must all line up at once. Appraisers remember them with the word DUST: demand, utility, scarcity, and transferability. Demand is desire backed by the ability to pay. Utility is usefulness. Scarcity means limited supply relative to demand. And transferability means ownership can pass with reasonably clear title. Remove anyone and market value collapses. Value isn't an inherent property of a thing. It's a relationship between an object and a market. A remote desert parcel can be scarce and transferable, yet worthless without demand and utility. Add a highway interchange and a growing town, and the same dirt suddenly commands real value. Transferability is the factor most people underrate. A parcel can be desirable, useful, and scarce, yet a clouded title, unresolved liens, or disputed boundary can still choke off its value. Exam traps swap endurability, affordability, or location for one of the true 4. The list is exact: demand, utility, scarcity, and transferability, and spotting the substitution is the whole skill being tested. Question 19. An appraiser distinguishes what a property should bring from what it actually sold for. Which of the following best describes market value as opposed to market price? Your options are A. The dollars spent to build. B. An opinion of probable selling price. C. The actual recorded sale figure. D. The assessed value for taxes. Before I reveal it, which one do you think is right? The correct answer is B. An opinion of probable selling price. B is correct because market value is an opinion of the most probable price a property should bring in a fair open market sale. Price is the actual figure a property did sell for, a historical fact rather than an estimate. A is wrong because dollars spent to build describes cost, not value. Cost reflects what creating the improvement required and may equal value only by chance, usually for new construction at its best use. C is wrong because the actual recorded sale figure is the market price, the very thing value is being contrasted with. Value is an estimate of probable price, while price is what already occurred. D is wrong because assessed value is a figure used for property taxation. It is a separate tax concept and is not the open market opinion of probable selling price that defines market value. Appraisers draw a hard line between what a property should bring and what it actually did bring. That line separates market value from market price. Market value is an opinion of the most probable price a property should command, assuming a competitive open market, a willing buyer and seller, no undue pressure, informed parties, and reasonable exposure time. Market price, by contrast, is simply the actual amount a property sold for in one transaction. The distinction matters because real sales aren't always fair or typical. Duress, family deals, or rush timelines can push price well above or below true value. Market value strips out that noise by assuming ideal conditions, which is why lenders and courts rely on it instead of a single sale price. Picture a home an appraiser concludes should sell for a certain figure under fair conditions. 2 weeks later, needing cash fast, the owner sells to a cousin for far less. That low number is the market price, while the appraiser's higher estimate remains the market value. Value is a forward-looking opinion of probable price under fair conditions, while price is the backward-looking fact of what actually happened. The gap between them widens exactly when a sale was anything but typical. Question 20. Which of the following principles holds that a buyer will pay no more for a property than the cost of acquiring an equally desirable substitute? Your options are A. Substitution, B. Anticipation, C. Regression, D. Plottage. What's your answer? Commit to one before I continue. The correct answer is A. Substitution. A is correct because the principle of substitution states that a buyer will pay no more than the cost of an equally desirable alternative. It is the foundation underlying all three approaches to value, especially sales comparison. B is wrong because anticipation holds that value reflects the expectation of future benefits. It drives the income approach by looking forward to income or amenities, not at the cost of a comparable substitute. C is wrong because regression holds that a better property loses value when surrounded by lesser ones. It addresses the drag of inferior neighbors, not a buyer's choice among equally desirable substitutes. D is wrong because plottage is the added value created when adjacent parcels are combined under one owner. It concerns assembling land, not the ceiling a substitute sets on what a buyer will pay. Substitution is the quiet law of gravity underneath almost everything an appraiser does. A knowledgeable buyer will pay no more for a property than the cost of an equally desirable substitute. Picture 2 nearly identical homes in the same subdivision, one priced a bit higher for no real difference in quality or location. Buyers choose the cheaper one, and that everyday choice caps what the pricier home can command. Substitution is the theoretical backbone of all three approaches to value. Sales comparison looks at what similar homes sold for. Cost approach reasons a buyer won't pay more than building an equivalent new. And income approach compares a property's return against other investments offering the same benefit. The exam trap is mixing substitution up with other principles. Conformity rewards fitting the neighborhood. Progression and regression describe how neighbors pull value up or down, and anticipation reflects expected future benefits. Only substitution names the ceiling set by a comparable alternative. Substitution is the discipline of alternatives. Value can't exceed what an equally desirable replacement costs to buy, build, or invest in, and that same engine quietly drives every approach to value. Question 21. A modest home sits among larger, more expensive houses. Which of the following principles explains why the modest home's value is lifted by its better neighbors? Your options are A. Regression, B. Contribution, C. Progression, D. Conformity. Pick one, trust your gut. Here's your chance to test yourself. The correct answer is C. Progression. C is correct because progression holds that a lesser property gains value from being located near better, more valuable properties. The smallest house on the block benefits from the higher quality of the surrounding homes. A is wrong because regression is the reverse effect, where a superior property is pulled down by lesser neighbors. The question describes a modest home gaining value, which is progression, not regression. B is wrong because contribution measures what a single component adds to the whole property's value. It addresses individual features like a remodeled kitchen, not the influence of neighboring homes on value. D is wrong because conformity holds that value is maximized when a property blends with its surroundings. It explains the benefit of similarity, not the specific lift a lesser home gets from better neighbors. A modest house among grander homes tends to be worth more than an identical house standing among equals. The principle behind that lift is called progression. Buyers don't value a home in isolation, they value the whole street. A well-kept block signals stability and demand, and that signal lifts even the smallest house on it. Progression is a lesser home gaining value among better neighbors. Regression is its mirror image, a superior home losing value among lesser ones. Both are really just departures from conformity, the idea that value peaks when a property matches its surroundings. Picture the same bungalow on two different streets. Among colonials, its value is pulled up. Now picture a mansion among bungalows instead. Its value gets pulled down by neighbors that can't support it. On the exam, ask whether the subject property is weaker or stronger than its surroundings, and whether its value is being pushed up or pulled down. That single question sorts progression from regression every time. Question 22. Which of the following principles identifies the use that is physically possible, legally permitted, financially feasible, and maximally productive for a site? Your options are A. Highest and best use, B. Conformity, C. Anticipation, D. Contribution. Which would you go with? Lock it in before the reveal. The correct answer is A. Highest and best use. A is correct because highest and best use is the use that is physically possible, legally permitted, financially feasible, and maximally productive. A use must satisfy all four tests to qualify as a site's highest and best use. B is wrong because conformity holds that value is maximized when a property blends with similar surrounding uses. It rewards similarity to the neighborhood rather than identifying a site's single most productive use. C is wrong because anticipation holds that value reflects the expectation of future benefits. It explains why expected income or amenities drive value, not the four-part screen for a site's optimal use. D is wrong because contribution measures what a single component adds to the value of the whole. It evaluates individual features like a remodeled kitchen, not the overall best use the entire site can support. Highest and best use is the appraiser's North Star, the reasoned use of a property that produces its greatest value. Defined by a four-part test every candidate use must pass. A use must be physically possible given the site, legally permitted under zoning and restrictions, financially feasible enough to justify itself, and finally maximally productive, the most valuable of the surviving options. The order matters. Physical and legal tests gate the analysis before profitability ever enters. Land isn't valued for what currently sits on it, but for what it could optimally support. Ignoring this would let a valuable corner lot be appraised as if destined to hold its aging house forever, instead of reflecting its true potential. Appraisers actually ask two separate questions. What is the highest and best use of the land as though vacant, versus as currently improved? Sometimes the existing building is worth keeping. Sometimes the land is worth more cleared and redeveloped, meaning the improvement itself detracts from value. A lucrative use that zoning plainly bans fails before profitability is ever considered. The highest and best use is the most valuable use among those that are actually possible and lawful, not the most valuable one imaginable. Question 23. Which of the following terms describes the increase in value that results when several adjoining parcels are combined under one owner into a more useful whole? Your options are A. Subordination, B. Accretion, C. Severance, D. Plottage. Don't overthink it. Which one feels right? The correct answer is D. Plottage. D is correct because plottage is the increase in value produced when contiguous parcels are merged, so the combined site is worth more than the separate lots. The process of combining the parcels is called assemblage. A is wrong because subordination is an agreement that reorders lien priority. It governs which creditor is paid first, not the increase in value created by joining adjoining parcels under one owner. B is wrong because accretion is the gradual addition of land by waterborne soil deposits. It adds physical land along a watercourse and has nothing to do with merging adjacent parcels for higher value. C is wrong because severance is detaching an item so real property becomes personal property. It splits things apart, the opposite of combining parcels, and does not describe the value gain from assemblage. When several adjoining parcels are combined under one owner, the whole can be worth more than the sum of its parts. The process of combining the lots is called assemblage, and the added value that results is called plottage. A developer wanting to build an apartment complex, shopping center, or office tower needs a footprint no single small lot can provide. Stitched together, the parcels support a use far more valuable than any piece alone, and buyers pay a premium for land already assembled to that scale. Plottage only appears when the assembled whole actually enables a higher use, not automatically whenever lots are combined. Merging parcels that will be used exactly as before creates no plottage, because the increment reflects the new use's added utility, not just the summed acreage. Don't mix up the process with the result, or confuse plottage with unrelated terms. Assemblage is the combining. Plottage is the value gain, while accretion describes gradual soil deposit by water, and subdivision describes splitting one tract into many. The exact reverse of assembly. When adjoining parcels, single ownership, and a jump in value from a better use all appear together, plottage names the gain, and assemblage names the act that produced it. Question 24. Which of the following approaches to value is generally considered the most reliable for appraising a single-family residence? Your options are A. The cost approach, B. The income approach, C. The sales comparison approach, D. The gross rent multiplier. Got a guess? Lock it in. The correct answer is C. The sales comparison approach. C is correct because the sales comparison approach is generally the most reliable for single-family homes because ample sales of similar properties exist. The appraiser adjusts comparable sale prices to indicate the subject's value. A is wrong because the cost approach is most useful for new construction and special purpose properties. For an ordinary house with plentiful comparable sales, sales comparison gives a more dependable result. B is wrong because the income approach values income-producing property based on expected income. A typical owner-occupied residence produces no rental income to capitalize, so this approach is not the best fit. D is wrong because the gross rent multiplier is a rough screening tool for small rentals using gross rent. It is not a full approach and is poorly suited to valuing a standard single-family home. When valuing an ordinary home, the most trustworthy method is to see what similar nearby homes recently sold for. This is the sales comparison approach, and it rests on a simple idea called the principle of substitution. A buyer won't pay more for a house than a comparable substitute recently cost. This approach is considered most reliable for houses because neighborhoods and subdivisions trade often enough that appraisers can find several true comparables sold within a recent window. That steady supply of recent arm's length sales of similar homes is what makes the method so persuasive. The adjustment is always made to the comparable, never to the subject, because the subject's price is unknown. That's what we're solving for. If a comparable is superior, the appraiser subtracts. If it's inferior, the appraiser adds, restating each comparable as if it were the subject. The exam tests whether you match the method to the property type. The cost approach fits new construction or special purpose buildings that rarely sell. The income approach fits rental investment property, and sales comparison owns the typical owner-occupied home with plentiful comparable sales. Whenever you see a typical residence with similar nearby homes that recently sold and prices adjusted for differences, that's your cue. Sales comparison is both the expected and the most reliable answer. Question 25. Which of the following single-family residences would receive the most accurate appraisal using the reproduction cost approach to value? Your options are A. A rental duplex, B. A vacant tract home, C. A typical suburban ranch, D. A historic residence. Which one is it? Pause the video if you need more time. The correct answer is D. A historic residence. D is correct because the reproduction cost approach builds an exact replica including original features, making it well suited to a historic residence. Such unique properties rarely sell and lack comparable income, so cost analysis fits best. A is wrong because a rental duplex generates income and is best valued by the income approach. Its earnings, not the cost to reproduce period features. Drive a buyer's decision and the most accurate estimate. B is wrong because a vacant tract home has ample comparable sales in its subdivision. Sales comparison would value it more accurately than reproducing a standard structure that the market sells routinely. C is wrong because a typical suburban ranch is a common property with many recent sales. The sales comparison approach captures its value better than reproducing a design the market trades frequently. Most homes are appraised by comparing recent sales, but a historic residence breaks that model. Its value lives in irreplaceable craftsmanship, so appraisers turn to the reproduction cost approach instead. Sales comparison starves because there are few or no similar landmark sales nearby. The income approach has nothing to work with since the owner occupies the home, rather than renting it. What remains is a construction character that can actually be measured and costed. Reproduction cost recreates the building exactly, right down to the original materials and workmanship. Replacement cost instead builds equivalent utility with modern materials, which would erase the very historic character a buyer is paying for. Picture a landmark house with elaborate woodwork, leaded glass windows, and a design never replicated since. An appraiser prices reproducing it exactly, subtracts for age and wear, adds land value, and arrives at a supported figure no thin set of sales could match. New construction uses cost approach because depreciation is minimal, and unique historic properties use it because comparables don't exist. Don't reflexively pick sales comparison just because it's a single family home. Ask whether it's truly unique first. Question 26. An appraiser applying the cost approach must choose between reproduction cost and replacement cost. Which of the following best distinguishes replacement cost from reproduction cost? Your options are A. Replacement builds an exact replica. B. Replacement builds equivalent utility with current materials. C. Replacement excludes the land value. D. Replacement ignores all depreciation. Take a second. Which answer would you pick? The correct answer is B. Replacement builds equivalent utility with current materials. B is correct because replacement cost estimates building a structure of equivalent utility using current materials and standards. Reproduction cost instead estimates an exact replica, including the outdated features and original design of the existing improvement. A is wrong because building an exact replica describes reproduction cost, not replacement cost. Replacement uses modern equivalence, so attributing the exact replica idea to replacement reverses the two definitions. C is wrong because excluding land is not what separates the two cost types. Both reproduction and replacement estimate the improvements, and the cost approach adds land value separately in either case. D is wrong because both methods still subtract accrued depreciation from the cost new. Replacement does not ignore depreciation, it simply starts from a modern equivalent rather than an exact historical copy. In the cost approach, appraisers choose between two ways to price a building, and the difference comes down to two words: equivalent versus exact. Replacement cost asks what it would cost to build something equally useful using today's materials and methods. Reproduction cost asks what it would cost to duplicate the original exactly, matching its design, materials, and workmanship, flaws and all. For a typical building, replacement is the default, since no buyer pays extra to recreate obsolete features. For a historic or architecturally significant building, reproduction fits because the old materials and craftsmanship are exactly what's being valued. Choosing between them is really a judgment about whether original details are an asset or just age. Picture a mid-century office building with plaster walls and dated systems. Replacement cost prices, modern drywall, current wiring, and today's HVAC delivering the same utility, while reproduction would price the original plaster and obsolete systems exactly as they were. Replacement equals equivalent utility with current materials, the everyday choice. Reproduction equals an exact copy with original materials, reserved for buildings whose historic character is the point. Question 27. A factory built next door reduces a home's value through a cause outside the property itself. Which of the following types of depreciation does this illustrate? Your options are A. Physical deterioration, B. Functional obsolescence, C. External obsolescence, D. Accrued appreciation. Before I reveal it, which one do you think is right? The correct answer is C. External obsolescence. C is correct because external obsolescence is loss in value caused by factors outside the property, such as a nearby factory or a declining neighborhood. Because the owner cannot control off-site causes, it is always incurable. A is wrong because physical deterioration is wear, tear, or damage to the structure itself. A neighboring factory does not physically wear the home, so the loss stems from outside forces, not deterioration. B is wrong because functional obsolescence comes from outdated design or features within the property. The problem here is an external influence next door, not a flaw built into the home's own layout. D is wrong because appreciation is an increase in value, not a form of depreciation. The question describes a loss of value caused by a neighboring use, which is the opposite of appreciation. A factory rises next door, and a nearby home loses value even though nothing about the house itself has changed. That loss is external obsolescence, depreciation caused by factors outside the property's own boundaries. External obsolescence, sometimes called economic or locational obsolescence, comes from things like a noisy factory, a new highway, a declining neighborhood, or a downturn in the local economy. The cause sits off the property, but the effect lands squarely on its value. Depreciation in the cost approach breaks into three types. Physical deterioration is wear and tear on the structure. Functional obsolescence is a defect built into the property's own design. And external obsolescence is loss caused from outside, like the factory next door. Picture a well-maintained house with an updated kitchen, a sound roof, and a functional layout, sitting one lot from a new manufacturing plant. The home's value falls because of noise and traffic, not because anything is wrong with the house itself. The owner cannot move the factory, reroute the highway, or fix a declining neighborhood, which is why external obsolescence is almost always incurable. Find whether the cause is inside the structure or outside the boundaries, and the category names itself. Question 28. In the income approach, which of the following correctly describes how the capitalization rate relates to value when net operating income is held constant? Your options are: A. A lower cap rate raises value. B. The cap rate has no effect. C. A higher cap rate raises value. D. The cap rate equals the interest rate. What's your answer? Commit to one before I continue. The correct answer is A. A lower cap rate raises value. A is correct because with net operating income held constant, value moves inversely to the capitalization rate, so a lower rate points to a higher value and a higher rate points to a lower value. B is wrong because the capitalization rate is the central driver in this approach and strongly shapes the value conclusion. Treating it as irrelevant ignores how directly the chosen rate moves the result. C is wrong because the relationship runs the opposite way. Raising the rate while income stays fixed lowers the indicated value rather than raising it. The two move in opposite directions. D is wrong because the capitalization rate reflects the return an investor expects from the property, not the lender's mortgage interest rate. Confusing the two mixes an investment measure with a financing term. In the income approach, value and the capitalization rate move in opposite directions. And understanding that inverse relationship is the whole point of this topic. The formula ties three quantities together. Value equals net operating income divided by the capitalization rate. Hold the income steady, and lowering the rate raises value, while raising the rate lowers value. The cap rate expresses the return investors demand, and demanded return is the price of risk. A low cap rate signals trust in the income, so buyers pay more for each dollar of it, while a high cap rate signals perceived risk, so buyers pay less. Picture two buildings with identical income, one stable and one risky. Investors accept a lower cap rate on the stable building because its income feels dependable, giving it the higher value, while the riskier building draws a higher cap rate and a lower value. Treat the cap rate as the divisor. A bigger denominator always shrinks the result. Rate up means value down, and rate down means value up, no matter how the exam tries to trick you. Question 29. Which of the following valuations does a real estate licensee prepare to help a seller set a listing price, and which must not be presented as an appraisal? Your options are: A. A use PUP appraisal. B. A comparative market analysis. C. An automated valuation model. D. An insurable value report. Pick one. Trust your gut. Here's your chance to test yourself. The correct answer is B. A comparative market analysis. B is correct because a comparative market analysis compares the subject to similar properties to help set a listing price or frame an offer. A licensee may prepare one, but it is less rigorous and is not an appraisal. A is wrong because a use PUP appraisal must be performed by a licensed or certified appraiser. A licensee preparing listing guidance is not delivering an appraisal, which follows formal professional standards. C is wrong because an automated valuation model is a software-generated estimate from data. A licensee personally preparing a pricing analysis is creating a market analysis, not running an algorithmic model. D is wrong because insurable value estimates the cost to replace improvements for insurance. It serves an insurance purpose and is not the pricing tool a licensee prepares for a seller's listing. A licensee helping a seller set a listing price prepares a comparative market analysis, or CMA. The most important thing to understand about a CMA is what it is not. It is not an appraisal. A CMA looks at homes that actually sold, homes currently competing on the markets, and homes that expired unsold. Together, these sketch a realistic price range for a listing or an offer. The bright line is who prepares it and what it is for. A licensee prepares a CMA to guide a listing or offer price, while a licensed appraiser prepares an appraisal as an independent, standards-based opinion of value, often for a lender or court. Picture a licensee pulling recent sales, checking active competition, and reviewing expired listings in a subdivision to recommend a listing price near the top of the supported range. That is a CMA at work, clearly labeled as guidance, not a certified valuation. If a seller needs a value opinion for a lender or a court, the licensee refers them to a licensed appraiser instead. Mixing up the two is exactly the error the exam is testing. Question 30. Which of the following standards must a licensed or certified appraiser follow when performing an appraisal for a federally related transaction? Your options are A. RESPA, B. the Interstate Land Sales Act, C. the Statute of Frauds, D. the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice. Which would you go with? Lock it in before the reveal. The correct answer is D. The Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice. D is correct because appraisers must comply with the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice, the National Ethical and Performance Standards. They follow the version of USPAP in effect when the appraisal is performed. A is wrong because RESPA governs settlement service practices and disclosures in residential closings. It addresses kickbacks and closing costs, not the professional standards an appraiser must follow when valuing property. B is wrong because the Interstate Land Sales Act protects buyers of undeveloped lots sold across state lines. It is a consumer disclosure law unrelated to the standards an appraiser applies to an appraisal. C is wrong because the Statute of Frauds requires certain contracts, including land sales, to be in writing. It is a contract enforceability rule, not the performance standard governing appraisal assignments. Any appraiser handling a federally related transaction answers to one governing rule book, the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice, or USPAP. It's the baseline of competence and integrity the whole appraisal profession is measured against. The standards exist because inflated, unreliable appraisals during the savings and loan crisis helped fuel massive losses. Congress responded by requiring uniform appraisal standards and licensing, and USPAP is the mechanism that answered that call, keeping collateral honestly valued rather than conveniently inflated. USPAP's mechanism has two halves. Ethics obligations require the appraiser to be independent, impartial, and free of any stake in the outcome, while competency and methodology requirements dictate how data is gathered, approaches applied, and conclusions reported. Picture the appraiser at the center, bound on one side by ethics and on the other by competency requirements. Together, those two forces produce an appraiser a lender can actually rely on for a federally connected loan. Fair housing law, license law, and lending disclosure rules are real, but none of them govern the appraisal itself. When the stem is about an appraiser's independent, impartial valuation on a federally related transaction, USPAP is the match. Question 31. A lender orders a valuation of a home before approving a mortgage. Which of the following best describes what the appraiser provides about the property? Your options are A. An independent opinion of value, B. a guarantee of the future sale price, C. a value the appraiser personally sets, D. a commission based on the value reached. Don't overthink it. Which one feels right? The correct answer is A. An independent opinion of value. A is correct because an appraisal is an independent, Impartial opinion of value supported by data and developed by approved methods. The appraiser estimates what the market indicates rather than setting or guaranteeing the value. B is wrong because an appraisal is an opinion, not a guarantee of any future price. The market ultimately determines what a property sells for, and the appraiser cannot promise a specific outcome. C is wrong because the appraiser does not create or set value. Value is determined by the market, and the appraiser merely estimates it from supportable evidence rather than assigning it personally. D is wrong because appraisers are paid a flat fee for the service, never a commission tied to the value reached. Charging a value contingent fee would violate appraiser independence rules. When a lender orders a valuation before approving a mortgage, what comes back is not a guarantee, not a sale price, and not an inspection report. It's an independent opinion of value. Independent means the appraiser has no allegiance to lender, borrower, or seller. Opinion means it's a reasoned professional judgment, not a certified fact. Value means it estimates worth under defined market conditions. The lender needs an unbiased read on the collateral before risking its money, so the appraiser must stay independent of everyone who wants the deal to close. A valuation slanted to please any party would defeat the entire purpose. Don't confuse the appraisal with its lookalikes. A home inspection checks physical condition, not market value. A comparative market analysis is just a licensee's pricing aid, and no appraiser ever gives a guarantee. Only the independent opinion of value fits a lender-ordered estimate of worth. Hold on to this: an appraisal is an opinion, never a fact or a guarantee, and its worth depends entirely on the appraiser's independence from everyone in the deal. Question 32. Which of the following deeds provides the buyer the greatest protection by warranting title against defects arising throughout the entire chain of ownership? Your options are A quitclaim deed, B, a special warranty deed, C, a bargain and sale deed, D, a general warranty deed. Got a guess? Lock it in. The correct answer is D, a general warranty deed. D is correct because a general warranty deed gives the buyer the greatest protection because its covenants extend back through the entire chain of title. The grantor warrants against the claims of all prior owners, not just their own. A is wrong because a quitclaim deed carries no warranties at all and gives the least protection. It conveys only whatever interest the grantor happens to hold, with no guarantee about the chain of title. B is wrong because a special warranty deed limits warranties to defects arising during the grantor's ownership. It does not protect against problems created by earlier owners, unlike a general warranty deed. C is wrong because a bargain and sale deed contains no express warranties, only an implication that the grantor holds title. It offers far less protection than a deed warranting the full chain of ownership. The general warranty deed sits at the top of the protection ladder, giving a buyer the greatest assurance the law allows. It warrants title against defects from the entire chain of ownership, not just the current owner's tenure. This backward-reaching promise is built from covenants. The covenant of Salesperson promises ownership and the right to convey. The covenant against encumbrances promises no undisclosed liens. Quiet enjoyment promises no disturbance from a superior claim. And further assurance with warranty forever promises the grantor will perfect and defend the title whenever a claim arose. Picture a chain of owners stretching back in time. A forged deed, an old unreleased mortgage, a missing heirs claim. Any of these can surface long after closing. The general warranty deed places that risk on the grantor, whose promise reaches all the way back through the chain. The exam tests this by comparing warranty reach. A special warranty deed only covers defects during the grantor's own ownership. A bargain and sale deed implies some ownership but offers limited warranties. A quitclaim warrants nothing, conveying only whatever interest the grantor happens to have. when a fact pattern stresses maximum protection and a promise stretching back through every prior owner. That's the general warranty deed at work. Question 33. Which of the following deeds is most commonly used to cure a cloud on title, such as a misspelled name in a prior recorded deed? Your options are A. A general warranty deed, B. A fiduciary deed, C. A quitclaim deed, D. A sheriff's deed. Which one is it? Pause the video if you need more time. The correct answer is C. A quitclaim deed. C is correct because a quitclaim deed is the standard tool for clearing a cloud on title because it releases whatever interest a party may hold. It is ideal for correcting record errors like a misspelled grant or name. A is wrong because a general warranty deed is used to convey ownership with full covenants in a sale. Its warranties are unnecessary for merely releasing a doubtful interest to clear a record error. B is wrong because a fiduciary deed is executed by a representative, such as an executor or trustee. It conveys estate or trust property under authority, not as the routine instrument for curing a title cloud. D is wrong because a sheriff's deed transfers title to the buyer at a foreclosure sale. It arises from a court-ordered sale, not from the routine clearing of a misspelling in the chain of title. A quitclaim deed doesn't promise good title. It simply releases whatever interest the grantor might have. That makes it the perfect tool for one very specific job, clearing a cloud on title. A cloud on title is any recorded irregularity that casts doubt on ownership. It might be a misspelled name, a questionable old easement, or a possible claim from a former spouse or distant heir, small doubts that are enough to stall a sale. Picture a title search revealing a prior deed with a misspelled name. The person named in that flawed deed signs a quitclaim, releasing any interest they might have to the current owner, and the cloud lifts, whether or not they ever truly held a claim. The lack of warranty isn't a weakness here, it's the point. The signer may not even know if they own an interest, so the quitclaim lets them release any possible claim without promising anything, tidying the record either way. A general warranty deed is what a buyer wants in an ordinary sale, promising good title. A quitclaim deed is what a title clearing situation calls for, releasing doubt without any promises at all. Question 34. An executor selling estate property warrants only against defects arising during the estate's ownership and not against earlier owners' acts. Which of the following deeds reflects this limited warranty? Your options are A. A special warranty deed, B. A general warranty deed, C. A grant of full covenants, D. A deed of reconveyance. Take a second. Which answer would you pick? The correct answer is A. A special warranty deed. A is correct because a special warranty deed, called a limited warranty deed in Ohio, warrants only against defects that arose during the grantor's ownership. Fiduciaries favor it because they cannot vouch for predecessors' acts. B is wrong because a general warranty deed warrants against defects throughout the entire chain of title. A fiduciary lacking knowledge of earlier owners would not extend such broad covenants over predecessors' acts. C is wrong because a grant of full covenants describes the broad protection of a general warranty deed. That conflicts with the limited ownership period only warranty the question specifically describes. D is wrong because a deed of reconveyance returns title to a borrower after a trust loan is paid. It releases a security interest and is unrelated to a fiduciary's limited warranty on an estate sale. An executor selling an estate's property faces a unique problem. They cannot honestly vouch for what happened to the title before they took charge. The deed built for this situation is the special warranty deed. Think of the grantor as a security guard who only vouches for their own shift. They'll swear nothing went wrong while they were watching, but they make no claims about what happened before they arrived. A general warranty deed covers the entire chain of title, answering for defects from any era. A special warranty deed only covers the grantor's own period of ownership, which is why executors, trustees, and lenders selling foreclosed property rely on it. The exam trap is that both share the word warranty, but the length of time covered is what actually separates them. Picture the timeline of ownership. Everything before the grantor took title is unwarranted territory, and everything from that point forward is covered. The special warranty deed draws its line exactly at the moment the grantor acquired the property. Whenever a fact pattern features an executor, trustee, or fiduciary who warrants only against defects during their own ownership, you're looking at a special warranty deed, not a general one. Question 35. Which of the following is required for title to actually pass from grantor to grantee under a deed? Your options are A. Recording at the county recorder, B. The grantee's signature, C. Delivery and acceptance, D. Payment of the conveyance fee. Before I reveal it, which one do you think is right? The correct answer is C. Delivery and acceptance. C is correct because title passes when the deed is delivered by the grantor and accepted by the grantee, both during the grantor's lifetime. Signing, recording, and payment are not the moment ownership transfers. A is wrong because recording provides constructive notice and protects priority, but does not transfer title. Ownership already passed on delivery and acceptance, so an unrecorded deed can still be valid between the parties. B is wrong because only the grantor signs the deed. The grantee's signature is not required for validity. The grantee's role is to accept the conveyance, which can occur without a signature. D is wrong because the conveyance fee is a transfer charge collected by the county, not a condition of title passing. Title transfers on delivery and acceptance regardless of when the fee is paid. Signing a deed does not transfer title. The moment ownership actually changes hands is delivery and acceptance. For title to pass, the grantor must deliver the signed deed with present intent to convey, and the grantee must accept it. Signing merely shows the grantor was prepared to convey, and recording afterward doesn't move title either. Picture a deed signed but locked away, never handed to anyone, never sent to an escrow. It's like wrapping a gift and hiding it in a closet forever. The intended recipient never truly receives it. Consider an owner who signs a deed for a grandchild but locks it in a safe, deciding to wait. Because it was never delivered with present intent, when the owner dies, title never passed and the house stays in the estate. When a question asks what makes a conveyance actually take effect, the answer is delivery and acceptance, not signing or recording. Question 36. Which of the following terms describes the documented sequence of conveyances, tracing ownership from earlier owners down to the present owner? Your options are A. The Habendum Clause, B. The Chain of Title, C. The Granting Clause, D. The Abstract Continuation. What's your answer? Commit to one before I continue. The correct answer is B. The Chain of Title. B is correct because the chain of title is the recorded sequence of conveyances and title events from the earliest recorded interest to the present owner. Each grantee becomes the next grantor, linking the records together. O is wrong because the Habendum Clause is the to have and to hold portion of a single deed defining the interest conveyed. It is one clause in one document, not the historical sequence of ownership transfers. C is wrong because the granting clause is the wording in a deed that expresses intent to convey. It appears within an individual deed and does not describe the linked history of past conveyances. D is wrong because an abstract continuation merely updates an existing abstract with newer entries. It is an updating step, not the term for the full documented succession of ownership from prior owners. The chain of title is the documented sequence of conveyances tracing a property from earlier owners down to the present one. Every deed recorded in the public records is a link and read in order. They form an unbroken chain from some starting point to today. A buyer traces recorded conveyances backward to confirm a seller truly owns what they're selling. This owner got it from that owner, who got it from the one before. A gap or missing deed raises serious doubt about whether title actually passed cleanly. Picture a title examiner working backward from the current owner. The present owner took title from a couple, who took it from a builder, who took it from the developer who first subdivided the land. Every recorded deed is present and consistent, so the chain of title is unbroken and the title is marketable. The chain of title is the ordered succession of transfers itself, not the summary report of it. An abstract of title is that condensed summary. Title insurance is the policy protecting against defects. And a cloud on title is a defect within the chain, not the chain as a whole. Whenever a stem describes documented conveyances, tracing ownership across owners or successive recorded links, it's pointing straight at the chain of title. Question 37. Which of the following best describes the coverage of a lender's title insurance policy compared with an owner's policy? Your options are: A. It protects the buyer's equity. B. It covers future zoning changes. C. It lasts forever at purchase price. D. It declines with the loan balance. Pick one. Trust your gut. Here's your chance to test yourself. The correct answer is D. It declines with the loan balance. D is correct because a lender's policy is written for the loan balance and decreases as the loan is paid down, expiring at payoff. It protects only the lender, so the buyer needs a separate owner's policy. A is wrong because the lender's policy protects the lender, not the buyer's equity. If the buyer suffers a title loss, the lender's policy provides no compensation to the buyer's ownership interest. B is wrong because title insurance does not cover future events like zoning changes. It protects against past defects already existing in the title, not regulatory changes that occur after the policy issues. C is wrong because lasting forever at the purchase price describes the owner's policy. The lender's policy instead tracks the declining loan balance and ends when the mortgage is fully repaid. Title insurance comes in two forms that protect different parties in completely different ways over time. Understanding how each one behaves as the years pass is the key to this concept. A lender's or mortgagee's policy protects only the lender and only up to what's still owed on the loan. As the borrower pays down principal, the lender's risk falls, so the coverage falls right along with it, disappearing entirely at payoff. The owner's policy works on opposite logic. It protects the buyer for the full purchase price, and that coverage never shrinks, lasting as long as the owner or their heirs retain an interest in the property. Picture the two coverages plotted side by side. The lender's protection sliding steadily downward until it vanishes at payoff, while the owner's protection runs flat and unbroken the entire time. A buyer who only pays for the lender's policy has protected the bank, not themselves. That's why buyers need a separate owner's policy to guard their own equity for the long haul. Question 38. A title company agrees to insure a parcel, even though a known minor defect appears in the records. Which of the following standard does this best illustrate? Your options are: A. Marketable title. B. Perfect record title. C. Insurable title. D. Equitable title. Which would you go with? Lock it in before the reveal. The correct answer is C. Insurable title. C is correct because insurable title is title a company will insure despite a known defect, often by listing exceptions in the policy. It is a lower standard than marketable title, which a court would compel a buyer to accept. A is wrong because marketable title is the highest standard a court would force a buyer to accept, free of serious doubt. A title insured despite a known defect falls short of that stricter requirement. B is wrong because perfect record title implies a flawless chain with no defects at all. The company is insuring around an existing known defect, so the title is not perfect, only insurable. D is wrong because equitable title is the buyer's interest under a sales contract before closing. It describes a stage of ownership, not the insurer's willingness to cover a parcel despite a known defect. Title rarely comes perfectly clean, so title companies don't demand perfection. Instead, they apply a practical standard called insurability. Insurable title means a title company is willing to insure a property even with a known defect, because it judges the risk of that defect causing a loss to be small enough to accept. Old easements, minor encroachments, and technical irregularities turn up constantly, and the insurer decides whether to insure over them. The exam loves pairing insurable title with marketable title. Marketable title is judged by what a reasonable buyer or a court would accept, while insurable title is judged by what a title company will insure. They often overlap, but not always. Picture a title search that turns up a small, old recorded easement of uncertain effect. The title company reviews it, decides the risk is remote, and issues a policy anyway. While the title wasn't flawless, but it was insurable. Whenever a stem describes an insurer agreeing to cover a parcel, despite a known flaw, that's insurable title. Whenever it describes title a court would force a buyer to accept, that's marketable title. Question 39. Which of the following is the primary legal effect of recording a deed in the county recorder's office? Your options are: A. It transfers title to the grantee. B. It gives constructive notice to the world. C. It pays off the seller's mortgage. D. It satisfies the conveyance fee. Don't overthink it, which one feels right? The correct answer is B. It gives constructive notice to the world. B is correct because recording gives constructive notice to the world of the buyer's interest, protecting priority against late purchasers and creditors. Title itself already passed on delivery and acceptance, not on recording. It is wrong because recording does not transfer title. Delivery and acceptance accomplish that. Recording protects the buyer's priority in the records, but is not the act that moves ownership to the grantee. C is wrong because recording a deed does not pay off any mortgage. A seller's existing loan is satisfied from sale proceeds and released by a separate recorded satisfaction, not by recording the deed. D is wrong because the conveyance fee is a transfer charge paid to the county auditor. Recording places the document in the public record for notice. It does not by itself satisfy that fee. Recording a deed does something subtle but powerful. It puts the whole world on notice of the transfer, whether or not anyone actually reads the record. The primary legal effect of recording is that it gives constructive notice to the world of the grantee's interest. The mechanism runs on the distinction between actual and constructive notice. Actual notice is what a person really knows, while constructive notice is what a person is legally charged with knowing, because it sits in the public records. By recording, a grantee turns private knowledge into public notice binding on everyone. Imagine a buyer who records a deed at the county recorder's office. If the same seller dishonestly conveys the property again to a second buyer, that second buyer is charged with constructive notice of the first interest and cannot claim to be an innocent purchaser. So the first buyer's priority is protected. The exam trap is confusing recording's effect with things it does not do. Recording does not make an invalid deed valid. and it is not required for title to pass between grantor and grantee, since delivery and acceptance already did that. Recording only adds protection against third parties. When a stem asks for the primary effect of recording, the answer is constructive notice. When it asks what actually transferred title, the answer is delivery and acceptance. And keeping those two ideas separate is exactly what this topic tests. Question 40. Which of the following describe acquiring title to another's land by possessing it openly, continuously, and without permission for the statutory period? Your options are escheat, B. Eminent domain, C. Adverse possession, D. Foreclosure. Got a guess? Lock it in. The correct answer is C. Adverse possession. C is correct because adverse possession is an involuntary transfer in which a possessor gains title by occupying land hostilely, openly, continuously, and exclusively for the statutory period. Ohio requires 21 continuous years. A is wrong because escheat is the state's claim to property when an owner dies with no will and no heirs. It involves an ownerless estate, not a trespasser earning title through long possession. B is wrong because eminent domain is the government's power to take property for public use with compensation. It is a paid government taking, not a private party gaining title by occupying land without permission. D is wrong because foreclosure is the forced sale of property to satisfy an unpaid debt. It transfers title through a lender's remedy, not through a possessor's open, continuous occupation over many years. Adverse possession is the startling doctrine that a trespasser can become an owner, gaining legal title simply by occupying land long and openly enough under conditions the law defines, even without ever buying it or receiving a deed. The doctrine exists to quiet stale claims and reward productive use over neglect. Property lines drift and owners abandon land for decades. So the law forces disputes to resolve within a reasonable time, favoring certainty and use over ignored paper claims. Each requirement is a hurdle. The possession must be open and notorious, continuous for the full statutory period, exclusive, actual, and hostile, meaning without the owner's permission. Miss any single element and the claim fails entirely. Picture someone building a fence a few feet onto a neighbor's lot, then openly using that strip as their own yard for years without permission. If every element is met, they can claim legal title to the strip, while an owner who never objected loses it. Permission is the fact that defeats the whole doctrine, no matter how long or open the use. Watch for the telltale phrases open and notorious, continuous, exclusive, and hostile, and remember that any hint of the owner's consent means the claim collapses. Question 41. In Ohio, which of the following parties is typically responsible for paying the conveyance fee imposed when real property is transferred? Your options are A. The county auditor, B. The lender, C. The title insurer, D. The seller. Which one is it? Pause the video if you need more time. The correct answer is D. The seller. D is correct because the Ohio conveyance fee and any permissive county transfer tax are typically the seller's responsibility, though the parties may negotiate otherwise in the purchase contract. The county auditor collects it at transfer. A is wrong because the county auditor collects the conveyance fee rather than paying it. The auditor administers the transfer and receives the charge, but the obligation to pay normally falls on the seller. B is wrong because the lender finances the buyer's purchase and does not customarily pay the transfer charge. The conveyance fee is a seller cost by default, separate from the buyer's loan arrangements. C is wrong because the title insurer issues coverage against title defects and has no role in the transfer fee. Paying the conveyance fee is the seller's customary obligation, not the insurer's. In Ohio, a fee falls due whenever real estate changes hands, and by long-standing custom, The seller is the one who pays it. The conveyance fee is a form of transfer taxation triggered by the deed transfer itself, collected by the county when the deed is recorded, and calculated on the sale price. It shows up on the settlement statement as a charge against the seller. The mechanism runs through recording. When the deed reaches the county recorder, the conveyance fee must be paid first, and the closing agent pays it out of the seller's settlement funds before the transfer is finalized. The exam trap is assuming buyers pay every closing cost, loan-related charges, the lender's title policy, and recording the mortgage side on the buyer's side, but the conveyance fee for transferring the property is customarily the seller's. When a STEM asks who pays Ohio's conveyance fee on a transfer, the answer points to the seller, while financing and mortgage recording costs belong to the buyer. Question 42. Which of the following government powers authorizes zoning and building codes to protect public health, safety, and general welfare without paying owners? Your options are A. Police power, B. Eminent domain, C. Airchat, D. Taxation. Take a second. Which answer would you pick? The correct answer is A. Police power. A is correct because police power is the authority of state and local government to regulate land use for the public health, safety, morals, and welfare. It is the basis of zoning and building codes and requires no compensation. B is wrong because eminent domain is the power to take property for public use, and it does require just compensation. It acquires land outright rather than merely regulating how owners may use it. C is wrong because a sheet is the state's claim to property of someone who dies without a will or heirs. It addresses ownerless estates, not the regulation of land use through zoning and codes. D is wrong because taxation is the power to levy charges that fund government services. While it burdens property, it does not establish the use regulations that zoning and building codes impose. Behind every zoning ordinance and building code stands the police power, the government's inherent authority to protect public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. Its defining feature is that government can regulate the use of private property without paying owners a dime. Police power belongs to a family of 4 government powers remembered by the word PEAT: police power, eminent domain, taxation, and airchat. Police power regulates use for the public good. Eminent domain takes property for public use, taxation raises revenue, and airchat returns ownerless property to the state. Government can regulate without paying because police power is treated as a condition of ownership, not a seizure of it. When a zoning law bars a factory from a neighborhood, it's defining the boundaries of acceptable use, not taking the land. The nuance courts probe is the line between an ordinary regulation, which needs no compensation, and a regulation so severe it destroys nearly all economic use, which becomes a taking requiring payment. Zoning and building codes almost always fall on the no compensation side of that line. When government regulates land use for public health, safety, or welfare without paying, that's police power. When it actually takes the property, that's eminent domain. And the compensation question is the cleanest way to tell them apart. Question 43. Of the 4 government powers limiting ownership, which of the following is the only one that requires the government to pay the owner? Your options are airchat, B. Taxation, C. Police power, D. Eminent domain. Before I reveal it, which one do you think is right? The correct answer is D. Eminent domain. D is correct because among police power, eminent domain, taxation, and airchat, only eminent domain requires payment. The government must pay just compensation when it takes private property for a public use. A is wrong because Esher lets the state claim property when an owner dies without heirs or a will. The state takes ownerless property at no cost, so it does not pay compensation. B is wrong because taxation is a charge to fund government, not a purchase of property. The owner pays the government rather than receiving payment, so taxation involves no compensation to the owner. C is wrong because police power regulates use without buying the property. Reasonable regulation requires no payment unless it goes so far as to destroy essentially all economic use of the land. Of the 4 government powers that limit private ownership, only one requires the government to pay the owner. That power is eminent domain, and the payment feature is the key the exam is testing. Police power regulates use for public health, safety, and welfare and pays nothing. Taxation makes the owner pay the government, enforced through liens. A sheet takes ownerless property from someone who died without a will or heirs, so there's no one to pay. Eminent domain alone reaches in, takes the property, and must hand the owner fair value in return. Picture a highway department needing a strip of a family's land to widen a road. It cannot simply seize it, it must use eminent domain through a condemnation proceeding and pay the family just compensation, the fair market value of the land plus any loss to what remains. The compensation requirement exists so the public, through the government, pays for land it needs rather than forcing one owner to donate it. Just compensation generally means fair market value, making the owner whole in money even though they never wanted to sell. On the exam, watch for take private property for public use, just compensation, condemnation, and the government must pay. Any stem describing payment to the owner points straight to eminent domain, not police power, taxation, or escheat. Question 44. An owner with an oddly shaped lot seeks permission to build closer to the line than the setback allows, citing a unique hardship. Which of the following is being requested? Your options are A. A variance, B. A non-conforming use, C. Spot zoning, D. A certificate of occupancy. What's your answer? Commit to one before I continue. The correct answer is A. A variance. A is correct because a variance is permission to deviate from a zoning requirement, such as a setback, to relieve a practical difficulty or hardship unique to the parcel. The zoning board grants it after a public hearing. B is wrong because a non-conforming use is a use that lawfully predated the zoning and is grandfathered. The owner here wants new relief from a setback, not protection of a use that already existed. C is wrong because spot zoning singles out one parcel for treatment inconsistent with surrounding zoning and is generally illegal. The owner is seeking lawful hardship relief, not an improper rezoning favoring one lot. D is wrong because a certificate of occupancy certifies that a completed building is fit to occupy. It is issued after construction, not as permission to deviate from a setback requirement before building. When a strange lot makes it impossible to follow a zoning rule to the letter, the law offers a narrow escape hatch, the variance. A variance is not a rezoning, it's narrow permission to deviate from a specific requirement like a setback, height limit, or lot coverage rule, because that one piece of land can't reasonably comply. Picture a lot that narrows to a wedge at the back. The required setbacks on each side eat into that narrowing width until almost no buildable space remains, a hardship rooted entirely in the land itself. The hardship must come from the land's own shape, slope, or size. A hardship the owner created or a simple wish for more profit never qualifies. Don't confuse it with a conditional use permit, which allows a use the ordinance already contemplates, or a non-conforming use, which predates current zoning entirely. A variance is strictly about dimensional relief for a genuine unique hardship kept to the minimum necessary. Question 45. A lawful corner store predates a new residential zoning rule and is allowed to continue operating. Which of the following terms describes this grandfathered use? Your options are A. A conditional use permit, B. A variance, C. A non-conforming use, D. Our buffer zone. Pick one. Trust your gut. Here's your chance to test yourself. The correct answer is C. A non-conforming use. C is correct because a non-conforming use is one that was lawful before the zoning changed and may continue as grandfathered. It typically may not be expanded, rebuilt if destroyed, or resumed after abandonment. A is wrong because a conditional use permit allows the use the ordinance expressly anticipates in that zone under conditions. The store here predates the rule and continues by grandfathering, not by a permit. B is wrong because a variance grants relief from a dimensional requirement due to hardship. The corner store is a pre-existing use allowed to continue, not a deviation from a setback or height limit. D is wrong because a buffer zone is a transitional strip separating incompatible uses. It is a planning device between districts, not a label for a lawful use that existed before the zoning changed. A corner store that predates a new zoning rule can often keep operating anyway. That legal holdover is called a non-conforming use. A non-conforming use was lawful when it began, but no longer fits a later zoning ordinance. It's still allowed to continue because it was legal and compliant before the rules changed around it. Picture a grocery store that served a neighborhood for decades until the city rezoned the surrounding blocks as residential only. Because the store existed lawfully before the change, it's grandfathered in and may keep running. The law limits non-conforming uses, so they fade rather than grow. The owner usually cannot expand the use, cannot rebuild it if substantially destroyed, and cannot resume it after abandonment, and some ordinances even phase it out through amortization. Don't confuse this with a variance or a conditional use permit, which are forward-looking approvals for something the current ordinance already addresses. A non-conforming use is different. It's tolerance for something old that predates the zoning, not permission for something new. Question 46. A church wishes to locate in a residential district where the ordinance allows such uses subject to stated conditions. Which of the following approvals fits this situation? Your options are a variance, B. Spot zoning, C. A non-conforming use, D. A conditional use permit. Which would you go with? Lock it in before the reveal. The correct answer is D. A conditional use permit. D is correct because a conditional use permit allows a use the ordinance already contemplates in that zone, such as a church or school, provided stated conditions are met. The use is anticipated rather than prohibited. A is wrong because a variance relieves a hardship from a dimensional rule for a use otherwise prohibited. Here, the ordinance already permits the church under conditions, so no hardship variance is needed. B is wrong because spot zoning improperly singles out one parcel inconsistent with the area plan and is illegal. A church locating under an ordinance that anticipates it is a lawful conditional use, not spot zoning. C is wrong because a non-conforming use lawfully predated the zoning and is grandfathered. The church is a newly proposed use the ordinance already allows by permit, not a pre-existing use being continued. Let's dig into the theory behind conditional use permits, a tool zoning ordinances use to let compatible but sensitive uses fit gracefully into a district. Uses like churches, schools, hospitals, daycare centers, and utility stations are generally welcome in residential areas, but each can bring traffic, parking demand, or noise that ordinary homes don't. So instead of banning or freely permitting them, the ordinance lists them as conditional uses requiring safeguards like adequate parking, buffering, or access. The defining feature is that the ordinance already contemplates this use in that district. This is what separates a conditional use permit from a variance. A variance excuses a hardship to allow something the ordinance forbids, while a conditional use permit grants something the ordinance already allows once conditions are met, with no hardship required. Picture a congregation applying to build a church in a residential zone, where the ordinance lists houses of worship as conditionally permitted, subject to parking and setback conditions. The congregation demonstrates it can meet those conditions and receives approval. No hardship needed, because the ordinance already welcomed the use. So when a stem describes a church, school, or similar use, the ordinance already permits subject to conditions. That's a conditional use permit. Say variance for dimensional relief based on genuine hardship. Question 47. Which of the following documents does a building official issue to certify that a newly completed structure is fit for use or habitation? Your options are A building permit, B, a certificate of occupancy, C, a plat map, D, a variance. Don't overthink it. Which one feels right? The correct answer is B, a certificate of occupancy. B is correct because a certificate of occupancy is issued after a building passes inspection, certifying it is fit for use or habitation. It is generally required before anyone may occupy the structure. A is wrong because a building permit authorizes construction to begin, issued before the work starts. It precedes the project rather than certifying a finished building's fitness for occupancy after completion. C is wrong because a plat map is the recorded drawing of a subdivision's lots, blocks, and streets. It identifies parcels for development, not the fitness of a completed structure for habitation. D is wrong because a variance is permission to deviate from a zoning requirement due to hardship. It addresses dimensional relief before building, not certification that a finished structure may be occupied. A finished-looking building is not automatically a lawful one to live in. Before anyone can move in, the local building official must issue a certificate of occupancy, certifying the structure is safe and code compliant. Imagine a builder finishing a new home for eager buyers. No matter how polished it looks, the buyers cannot lawfully move in until the building official inspects it and issues the certificate confirming it meets code. The certificate of occupancy is the final checkpoint in a process that began with the building permit. The permit authorizes construction to start. Inspections confirm the work is safe, and only then does the certificate authorize people to actually occupy the space. Exam questions often mix up four documents: the building permit, which authorizes construction to begin; the certificate of occupancy, which authorizes use once construction is done; the deed, which transfers ownership; and the certificate of title, which concerns ownership defects, not physical safety. Whenever a question describes a document certifying that a finished building is fit for occupancy or habitation, the answer is the certificate of occupancy, not a permit or a title document. Question 48. Which of the following describes a lawsuit in which an owner forces the government to pay because its action effectively took the property's use without a formal proceeding? Your options are A, inverse condemnation, B, spot zoning, C, a shed, D, subordination. Got a guess? Lock it in. The correct answer is A, inverse condemnation. A is correct because inverse condemnation is a suit by the owner demanding compensation when government action has effectively taken or destroyed the property's use without a formal condemnation. The owner inverts the usual roles. B is wrong because spot zoning is the illegal singling out of one parcel for inconsistent treatment. It concerns improper zoning of a lot, not an owner's claim that the government effectively took the property. C is wrong because escheat is the state's acquisition of property left by an owner who died without heirs. It addresses ownerless estates, not an owner suing the government for a de facto taking. D is wrong because subordination is an agreement reordering lien priority among creditors. It governs who gets paid first on the property, not a claim that a government action amounted to a taking. When a government action quietly destroys the use of private property without any formal taking, the owner can sue to force payment. That reverse lawsuit is called inverse condemnation. In ordinary eminent domain, the government is the plaintiff, openly taking property and offering to pay. In inverse condemnation, the owner is the plaintiff, suing to prove a taking happened and recover compensation. The direction flips, but the constitutional standard stays identical. Picture a public project that repeatedly diverts stormwater onto a landowner's field, permanently ruining part of it, with the agency never filing to condemn anything. The owner sues an inverse condemnation, and if a court agrees a taking occurred, the government must still pay. The exam trap is confusing three scenarios. Eminent domain is the government openly taking and paying. A valid regulation limits use without paying and creates no claim. Inverse condemnation is the gap between them, where government action effectively takes property but was never run through a formal case, forcing the owner to sue. Whenever facts show an owner suing the government because it effectively took property without a formal proceeding and demanding just compensation, that's inverse condemnation. Question 49. When a recorded subdivision restriction and a public zoning rule conflict over how law may be used, which of the following controls? Your options are A. The zoning rule always controls. B. The more restrictive provision controls. C. The private restriction is automatically void. D. The less restrictive provision controls. Which one is it? Pause the video if you need more time. The correct answer is B. The more restrictive provision controls. B is correct because when a private restriction and public zoning conflict, the more restrictive provision controls. If zoning permits a use but the recorded restriction forbids it, the stricter prohibition governs the parcel. A is wrong because zoning does not automatically override a stricter private restriction. A government permit does not authorize violating recorded covenants. So the more restrictive of the two prevails, not zoning by default. C is wrong because a private restriction is not void merely for conflicting with zoning. Lawful restrictions remain enforceable. Only restrictions requiring an illegal result, such as discriminatory ones, are void. D is wrong because the less restrictive provision does not win a conflict. The governing rule is precisely the opposite. The stricter limitation controls when private and public controls disagree. When a private deed restriction and public zoning both address land use but disagree, the law doesn't automatically favor one over the other. Instead, whichever rule is more restrictive wins, and the owner must comply with both. Zoning is the community's minimum standard created under the government's police power. A recorded subdivision restriction is a private promise, often set up by a developer to preserve a neighborhood's character. Since both are valid and both bind the land, only requiring the stricter, one honors both at once. Picture zoning permitting a generous building height, but a recorded restriction capping it lower to preserve views. The owner is held to the lower cap because on this specific point the restriction is the stricter rule. The analysis happens point by point, comparing height, setback, and use restrictions separately, applying whichever source is stricter on that specific question. A shed forbidden by covenants but allowed by zoning is still banned, and a use forbidden by zoning but allowed by covenants is still banned. The exam trap is assuming zoning always wins, or that deed restrictions always yield to public law. Neither is true. Whenever a stem pits a covenant against zoning, Remember, the more restrictive provision controls, regardless of whether it's public or private. Question 5. Which of the following is a long-range policy guide for a community's growth that zoning ordinances are enacted to implement? Your options are A. A certificate of occupancy, B. A subdivision plat, C. The comprehensive plan, D. A deed restriction. Take a second. Which answer would you pick? The correct answer is C. The comprehensive plan. C is correct because the comprehensive or master plan is a long-range policy guide for coordinating a community's growth. Zoning ordinances are the detailed legal tools enacted to carry out that plan's vision. A is wrong because a certificate of occupancy certifies that a finished building may be occupied. It is a construction stage approval for one structure, not a community-wide policy guide for future growth. B is wrong because a subdivision plat is a recorded map of lots, blocks, and streets within a development. It implements one project's layout rather than guiding the entire community's long-range growth. D is wrong because a deed restriction is a private limit on the use of a particular parcel. It binds individual owners, unlike a comprehensive plan that sets public policy for the whole community's development. Before any zoning line is drawn, a community decides what kind of place it wants to become and records that vision in a comprehensive plan. The comprehensive or master plan sets goals for land use, housing, transportation, and public facilities and open space, expressing the community's intended pattern of development over many years. The plan comes first and states the policy, while zoning comes second and implements it, translating broad goals into specific rules about what may be built where. Picture a city whose plan calls for a walkable commercial corridor, housing near transit and preserved green space. Zoning then carves out commercial, high-density residential, and conservation districts to match. A stem describing a long-range, advisory vision for the whole community points to the comprehensive plan. One describing binding, present-day district rules points to zoning. That brings today's property valuation and title review to a close. If you're hungry for more practice, head over to our website. You'll find hundreds of free questions waiting there, along with complete study guides covering everything you need to know. It's all organized for you to explore at your own pace. Just follow the link below and dive in whenever you're ready to keep sharpening your skills. Subscribe and stay tuned for the next part. Good luck on your exam.